Admonition the fifth. But first you need opportunity. My mother-in-law lived on the Isle of Arran in a wonderful tumble-down ramshackle farmhouse with views of Ailsa Craig and goats. Not views of goats, obviously, but goats present at the house, occasionally in the house, more famously in our friend Adam's car, a transgression he refused to see. He also refused to note the masticated tax disc or the resigned seen-it-all quality of the postmistress's sigh when proffered limp remains and the excuse Dilly ate it. And geese. There were also geese. In the corner by the gate, the best house alarm known to man. It's not certain whether a conventional alarm would raise the village, but utterly panicked geese would, their squawks filling the glen all the way down to Kildonan. Geese would bring McHales, McFadgeons and Van Bees charging up the hill, such the power and volume of geese. But geese and the raised agricultural caste are beside the point here, though let them serve as background, if not in person, then by implication. No, more importantly, the glen, Sue's home, included the venerable Beau, a huge midnight black Newfoundland who occupied a pivotal role in the household and therefore life in general. His was the enthusiastic greeting on arrival, his the buffeting and tail-thumping as you brought in the bags, his the anticipatory, deep-chested woofing when you pandered to his excitement by thumping his sides, his the silent demands for attention when he leant against your leg as you stood talking to one another, his the call to end late-night kitchen festivities when he'd appear in the doorway to the hall, his duvet in his mouth, and sigh loudly. He'd eyres, peonies lining his jollops, and heave the bedding into fuller view, as if to say, "Come on, you lot, you've had enough. It's time for bed," that single malt notwithstanding. Sue would laugh and usher the old man into his abode under the stairs, where, she said, he'd settle with his slippers and pipe, grumbling all the while. His point would have been made, though, and we'd all troop off to our various night-time accommodations. And it was Beau who expressed his reluctance to allow Sadie to marry me by lying down on her train before she reached the altar. And it was walking in the hills and glens of Arran with Beau and Sadie that taught me to love Scotland. And it was that newfound love of landscape, the architecture, the people, that meant we wholeheartedly supported my father and stepmother's move from the fen in Norfolk to Lismore in the early noughties. And it was to visit Dad and Jill after a stay with Sue that Sadie and I found ourselves travelling north from Portavadie ferry up the A886 towards a lunch at the original homely version of the Loch Fyne oyster bar. And it was along that road, the one that wends its way along above the Kyles through Tennebruch, opposite the Isle of Bute and down past Ormedale into the gentle gullet of Glendaruel, that Sadie and I allowed our curiosity its head. If you have ever driven north through Glendaruel, you'll know the road seems to burrow through a tunnel of birch and alder, ash and rowan, Scots pine and sitka, and by doing so provides tantalising glimpses of river in by fields filled with livestock and white-painted farm steadings. And if you are not used to this apparently gentle, apparently bucolic, and apparently timeless rural scene, then I challenge you not to think as we did, wouldn't it be lovely to live in a glen like this? And it was in that state of gentle, place-inspired euphoria that as the road crested on its inevitable journey out of the glen over the Lenach to Loch Fyne and Straker, we were confronted with a large "For Sale" sign on the side of the road. I remember it as being very, very large, black on white, Arial or possibly Futura. No branding, just those two words on a rectangular sign and post, as if planted by some mischievous, wily coyote, just for us, on the instant, and still vibrating with the force of its impact. Naturally, I slowed, the lift of my foot from the accelerator an implicit question. I think Sadie agreed, said we should, or perhaps could. We had the time, the booking for lunch was in a couple of hours. I think I replied, what harm could it do? What harm, indeed?